Like, why are they still doing this the whole time? To torture us? I think it's torture. Hi everyone, it's Ari Milan and welcome to The Perfect Balance, where I help law students find the perfect balance between a successful law school career and a thriving personal life. Let's get into it. Today's video is all about how I got into law school with a low LSAT score. Let's talk about it. So before we jump into the LSAT, there are a few things that I want to talk about that are key to getting into law school. So the first thing I want to talk about is what to do when you are still in undergrad. There are no major prerequisites to get into law school. You can get into law school with any major. So the main thing to focus on is making sure that you have a major that you can do well in. Your GPA is super important to your law school application, so you want to make sure that it is as high as possible. So make sure you're picking a major that interests you. So personally, I went to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and graduated in 2015 with my bachelor's in communications, African American studies minor, and a pre-law concentration. To be honest, I kind of landed on my major. I switched majors like 5 times when I was an undergrad. I had no idea what I was doing. I was a history major, a poli-sci major, journalism major, all over the board. But the one thing that remained constant was my pre-law concentration, and I made sure that I was taking classes that required a lot of writing. I talk about how important writing is in law school in my last video, which I will link above, where I discuss all the things I wish I knew before I started law school. So even though I switched majors like 5 times, I still ended up graduating with a 3.7 GPA. If you know you want to go to law school while you're still in undergrad, you should also make sure that you are super involved on campus. It's best to have long-term involvement in a few select organizations rather than having short-term involvement in a bunch of different organizations. So I want to make sure I'm being super transparent in this video and giving you all the stats that I think were looked at when I was applying to law school. When I was an undergrad, I was super involved. I was the vice president of the Black Student Union. I was in my sorority. I was a resident advisor. I was on the chancellor's committee for LGBTQ rights. I was in a mentorship program. So I definitely had a lot of involvement, and I think that certainly helped my application. Last thing you should do if you know you want to go to law school while you are still in undergrad is to utilize your summers. So the summers are a great opportunity to get real legal experience. You should definitely take that time to try to intern at a law firm. Even if it's a solo practitioner or a boutique law firm in your town, getting that experience will not only look good on your law school applications, it will also help you decide whether or not you actually want to be a lawyer. I actually interned at a big law firm in Chicago and ended up working there as a paralegal after I graduated. So I think that that opportunity definitely helped me figure out whether or not I really wanted to pursue a legal career. The next thing I did to get into law school was research the schools that I wanted to apply to. So the main thing that people talk about when applying to law school is how the school is tiered. But personally, ranking was not the most important factor for me when I was applying to law school, but it is an important factor to consider, so let's talk about it. So every year, US News ranks all of the law schools in the country into different tiers. Every tier has 50 schools in it. So tier 1 is the top 50 schools. The next 50, so 51 through 100, is tier 2, so forth and so on. And of course, at the top, you have the coveted T14. The T14 are the top 14 law schools in the country. The T14 law schools are not only going to be the most difficult to get into, they're going to be the ones that have the best job opportunities. And that's because a lot of these big law firms recruit heavily at the T14 schools. Not exclusively, but extremely heavily. If you go to a T14 law school, you don't necessarily have to be at the top of your class in order to get some of those more prestigious big law firm jobs. So it's important to remember that the further down you go in the tiers, the higher you have to be in your class to be eligible for some of those big law jobs. I also want to note that I keep referencing big law, and big law is just large law firms, some of the world's largest law firms that are ranked by M100. I'll include a little definition of exactly what big law is. That's not everyone's interest, but it is a big factor in how schools are ranked. So outside of ranking, the main things that I personally looked for when I was researching what law schools to apply to were what employers recruited at that school, the geographic location of where the alumni practiced, the alumni network, and the overall culture of the school. And I'll discuss that a little more in my next video when I talk about why I chose to go to Howard for law school. The next thing I did to get into law school was make sure that my letters of recommendation were on point. One of the best pieces of advice that I received with regard to letters of recommendation is to start early. Like, start earlier than you think you need to start. And that's because your recommenders are likely going to take more time than you thought to get those letters in. And the last thing you want is to not have a complete application because you're waiting on a letter of recommendation. So start as early as possible. You typically have 3 buckets of people to choose from when it comes to writing your letters of recommendation. You have your undergrad professors, your employers, and your non-familial mentors. I personally had 1 letter of recommendation from each of those buckets. So I had 1 law school professor, 1 previous employer who was a partner at a law firm that I worked at, and then I had 1 mentor who had known me for years. It's super important that you make sure the people writing your letters of recommendation know you well. Like, they need to know you. And that's because you want them to write a compelling letter. You want them to really be able to talk about who you are and all of your characteristics, and not just some like boilerplate letter from your mom's brother, sister, cousin who happens to be a lawyer and worked for the senator. Like, no, you don't want that far off person that doesn't know who you are. Regardless of how prestigious the person may be, that letter won't hold weight unless it is compelling. Now, if you can get someone that knows you and holds a lot of weight, like, bing, bang, boom, you in the door. But if you have to choose, pick the person that knows you well and will write the best letter on your behalf. The next thing I did to get into law school was focus on my personal statement. I don't know how many times I've said this, but your personal statement is your opportunity to shine. It is the one part of the application that is unlike any other applicant. So when writing your personal statement, you need to make sure that you are 1, writing a compelling narrative, 2, have perfect grammar and 0 typos, and 3, you are not regurgitating your resume. Like, they got your resume already. Like, it's part of your application. They received it. Please don't run through it again. That's not fun for anyone. So you want your personal statement to tell a narrative, tell a compelling story that links your personal experience to your goals and your skills and ties all of that into why you want to go to law school and how you can add value. So for example, I wrote my personal statement about protests that I helped organize in response to some racist events that happened when I was an undergrad in the wake of Trayvon Martin's murder. I connected that to racial injustices and disparities that were extremely prevalent in the areas that I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and tied that into my desire to be a lawyer and effectuate change in the Black community. I also wrote diversity statements for a lot of law schools. So diversity statement is an additional essay that you can write for your law school application that talks about how you would add a unique perspective to the classroom. So if you don't know, Black women make up less than 2% of all lawyers in the country. So I made sure that I wrote about how my perspective as a Black woman from an underserved community and as a first-generation law student would add something of value to the classroom. Now to everyone's favorite topic, the LSAT. So I had to mentally prepare to talk about this topic because the LSAT was a dark time. Like, I hated the LSAT. I don't personally think the LSAT is helpful. I don't think that it tells you anything about how someone is going to do in law school. But you know, it's a part of the game and we all signed up to play, so here we go. I want to start by saying that your LSAT score is not a testament to what you can do or what you will become. Because if you look at my LSAT score alone, you would not think that I would be where I am today. Like, at all. While some law schools are allowing you to take the GRE to apply now, the LSAT is either required or preferred by the majority of law schools in the United States. So it's still a very, very important part of your application. So I tried to find my LSAT score before making this video, but I couldn't get into my LSAT account. So I don't have my exact score, but I know that it was in the mid 150s. I want to say it was a 155. If it was not a 155, it was like a 154 or a 156. So for those of you who don't know, LSAT scores range from 120 to 180. I had a personal goal score of 165, and I was consistently scoring 165 or higher on all of my practice exams. But the day of the test came, and in the 150s we were. So when I first got my LSAT score, I was like devastated. I was sad, I cried. I put so much blood, sweat, and tears into taking the LSAT, and then my score came out, and I was just like, should I wait? Like, I'm not gonna get into any law schools. And I had one mentor who pushed me to apply. I was gonna retake it. I do think that in some situations, retaking the LSAT is beneficial, but I just went and applied. I actually did get into a couple of T14 law schools despite my low LSAT score. Even if you don't reach your goal score, that doesn't mean that you won't get into law school. Obviously, if you have a higher LSAT score, that is going to help you a lot. Getting a low LSAT score is not the end of the world. It does not mean that you should not apply to law school. And in my opinion, it has no bearing on the type of lawyer you're going to be. With my 155 on the LSAT, I got into over 10 law schools, some T14 law schools, several Tier 1 law schools. I graduated at the top of my law school class, and I'm working at a top law firm. So remember that your LSAT score is not indicative of what you're going to be. I would also just say, make sure that you take the LSAT seriously. Like, you need to dedicate the time into preparing for the LSAT. Even if you can afford to buy a LSAT prep course, you can't buy the discipline. So you need to make sure that you are disciplined, diligent, and organized about studying for the LSAT. Like, it is not a game. So the next thing I did to get into law school was make sure that I had some legal work experience. Nowadays, a lot of schools prefer you to have some work experience prior to coming to law school. So I took a year in between undergrad and law school to get some legal work experience. First, I worked as a paralegal at a big law firm in Chicago, and then I got a fellowship to work at a policy institute in California. So I definitely think that those experiences helped boost my law school application and definitely made me stand out. The good thing about having legal work experience is that it shows the admissions officers that you know what it's like to be in a legal environment. So those are some of the things that I did to get into law school with a low LSAT score. If you have any questions or found any of this helpful, make sure you comment and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.